So, a tower that I did not expect to get a buff or even a change in this update is the military base. Because the military base, I can't lie, is being seen as like a really balanced tower. Yeah, sure, it may not be the most powerful tower ever in Tower Defense Simulator. However, over time, it can be quite reliable to call upon. It may not be the best speedrunning tower, but it is a very reliable tower to beat games with. However, in this update, it's gotten buffed, apparently. We're going to see the validity of that. Now, with the military base, there was also a bug fix when it comes to the reporting of this, because previously, here, the military caravan would always mention the fact that it periodically spawns in a Humvee when it ran over enemies. However, it's no longer the case after you upgrade it to a tank. I mean, it still says military caravan, but it now says periodically spawns in a tank to run over and attack enemies, and obviously the railgun tank, it now mentions the railgun tank as seen here. Also, yes, this tower is stun immune, which is very weird because this tower doesn't it can't be stunned in any meaningful way anyways, so it's pretty useless. Anyways, previously the military base at level 0 had a spawn rate of 50, whereas now it has a spawn rate of 45 seconds. Furthermore, they have buffed the health of the Humvee 1 that spawns in from the military base. Previously it had 30 health, whereas now it has 50 health, or in my case 53 because of the skills. Obviously, when it comes to certain things, I'm just going to assume that you haven't enabled skills or you haven't upgraded the skills which increases the health of the units in Tower Defense Simulator. So because of these changes, cost efficiency is actually calculated based on the RAM DPS of the military base and the spawn rates and the health of the military base. So actually it's increased from 0.6 DPS to 1.11 DPS, going from 666.67 DP cost efficiency to 360.36 cost efficiency. So pretty good, I must say. Now at level 1, the only change here is the fact that its spawn rate has decreased from 35 seconds to 30 seconds. Yes, a 5-second decrease in its delay. Now, you may think that that's not really much of a big deal. However, it has actually quite a big deal, especially because, well, the Humvee has actually also increased itself from 30 to 50, and the Humvee hasn't changed at this level. Thereby meaning that the DPS, the RAM DPS of the military base, has increased from 0.86 to 1.67, and the cost efficiency has decreased from 697.67, which was the worst cost efficiency in Tower Defense Simulator. I can't lie, it sounds like the worst cost efficiency in Tower Defense Simulator, but maybe the Chiromancer, to 359.28. So a like-for-like increase in DPS, whereas remaining about the same level of cost efficiency. As for level 2, the health of the Humvee that spawns in has increased from 60 to 80. That's quite a significant increase. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's like a 33% increase. When you couple that with the spawn rate decreasing from 35 seconds to 30 seconds at this level, I mean, the range doesn't really matter, it's 5, and that's remained the same. It means that the DPS for this level of the military base has increased from 1.71 to 2.67, cost efficiency going from 584.8 to 374.53. A cost efficiency of about 300, right? You would expect that from, like, a bad tower in Tower Defense Simulator, or a bad level in Tower Defense Simulator, yet you get this out of a unit, which I find really staggering, that the military base is capable of dealing this much DPS in unit form. It's, like, bottled up, right, and then rams with an enemy. It bottles that up, and it has an equivalent DPS of towers, but yet it can be split across an entire path. I find that quite interesting, that the developers have gone for that. Anyways, at level 3, they have actually increased the price of this upgrade, going from 1,600 to 1,750. Yes, this is more expensive. However, the health of the Humvee 3, or whatever the version is here, the health has increased from 90 to 100, and you can also collide with this Humvee. Okay, it's just a base 1776 glitch, I guess. And the damage has increased from 3 to 4, yet it's not mentioned in the upgrade. Huh. Yeah, on the unit it says 4 damage, whereas on the upgrade it says 0 to 3 damage. which is incorrect, obviously. I mean, the damage shown off here is what the military base tower can deal, not the unit, so that's incorrect. The developers would need to change that. The spawn rate has decreased from 35 seconds to 30 seconds, which is important because it changes the DPS overall of this tower. So the range will remain the same at 30 as well, and the fire rate remains the same at 0.2. So the DPS for the Humvee 3 is now 19.23 compared to the 14.42 that was previously. The RAM DPS has increased from 2.57 to 3.33, meaning that the cost efficiency has decreased from 153.03 to 121.9, which is, it's pretty good. Very good, I must say. Now, as for level 4, the upgrade cost has decreased from 8,000 to 7,500, meaning that overall the total price has also decreased from 10,600 to 10,250. The health of the tank has remained the same at 500. The damage has remained the same at 10. The cannon splash damage has remained the same at 40. The airstrike damage, while it's remained the same at 75 times 6 missiles or 6 bombs, it's actually decreased in price because previously it used to cost 500 to use an airstrike. Now it only costs 250. The fire rate remains the same, so does the cannon fire rate. The range remains the same at 30. And so overall, the DPS for the military-based tank has remained the same at 68.08. But because of the changes of the spawn rate going from 35 seconds to 30 seconds, the RAM DPS for the military base has increased from 14.29 to 16.67, and the cost efficiency has decreased slightly from 128.83 to 120.94. Again, this doesn't highlight the changes to the military base all that well. 5-second decrease in the military base means that overall, in the same minute, you can have 2 military bases, whereas previously you could only have 1. Because previously it was 2 military bases over 70 seconds, whereas now it's 2 military bases over 60 seconds. I think that's quite significant. Over, like, say, 10 minutes, you're spawning in, like, about 2 to 3 more tanks, which could be quite significant against, like, final bosses, for example. Meanwhile, as for level 5, they've actually increased the price of the military base from 24,000 to 25,000 for this upgrade, meaning that the total price has increased from 34,600 to 35,250. The health, however, of the military base, the railgun tank, has increased from 1,500 to 1,600. The damage has increased from 24 to 25, despite what the military base here says. I mean, this military base is kind of glitched. I mean, they should update it to show the damage of the actual unit as well, but fair enough. Cannon splash damage has remained the same at 80. The airstrike damage has remained the same at 125 by 6 missiles, but obviously the decrease in airstrike cost to 250 as opposed to the 500 that it was previously. Spawn rate, as mentioned previously, decreased from 35 seconds to 30 seconds, and the DPS, therefore, has increased from 178.57 to 184.9, and the RAM DPS has increased from 42.86 to 53.33, so the cost efficiency has decreased from 156.3 to 147.97. Now, as I mentioned previously, the military base was already considered to be a good tower, perhaps not the best tower in Tower Defense Simulator, but a good tower nevertheless. Now, it makes the military base probably a meta tower, a tower that you could probably rely upon in Tower Defense Simulator. Now, it doesn't really make it a speedrunning tower, which I think that's what most people look for in a tower nowadays, especially in Fallen mode, like a speedrunning tower. However, amongst new players to Tower Defense Simulator, I think the military base could be the best tower because, really, you just need to place it on the military base and you don't need to think about it too much. The weaknesses of the military base are obviously flying enemies, can't really detect them, but also 2-path maps because it doesn't double the amount of units that spawn in the military base. But I mean, other than that, the military base could be heavily relied upon. And, I mean, obviously, it does also have a placement limit of 5, so you can't heavily rely upon it. It can't be the only tower that you bring to Tower Defense Simulator, at least for the most part. However, it is still a very meta tower, as it was previously, but now it's become even more meta. And I think especially because of the changes for the spawn rate going from 35 seconds to 30 seconds at most levels means that the military base is a more reliable tower than it was previously. Because previously, when it comes to like hardcore mode, sometimes you could let some enemies through because the spawn rate of the military base didn't catch up to the amount of enemies that spawned in. Now, with some military base buffs early on, the military base could become a reliable hardcore tower that you use early on. Now, this is in anticipation of a hardcore mode rework that is coming, or, well, is speculated to be coming, because I don't think Below Natural has confirmed it ever since the Void Reaver speculation update for the model. However, it is a point to note, given the fact that, yes, the military base does use up all of its DPS all in one go, and having a lower spawn rate, a faster spawn rate, means that it has become a better hardcore tower. However, there still is an issue where if you place down the military base, you still need to wait for the small seconds or so before it can spawn in. Previously, it was 50 seconds, but now it's 45 seconds, but obviously that can now decrease to 30 seconds if you upgrade it to level 1. That's still an issue that you can see with the military base, but overall, it's still pretty good early on, I must say.